Hello and welcome to this evening's Angela Ray Show. I hope that you all have had a great week thus far. Of course, last week we were off on a little mental health break, taking some much needed self care. And speaking of self care, September is National Self Care Awareness Month. And we've been talking in September about ways that you can better your health care, your self care, that is, and that health care is a part of that. So is your emotional well being, as well as so many facets of our being. They're just multiple parts of self care. Just want to go ahead at the top of the broadcast and shout out everyone who will be catching tonight's broadcast on the replay. Thank you so much for hanging out, and thank you so much to one of my partners in broadcast, my PIB, Cassandra Jalla, for joining the show on this evening. She has a great show herself called Cassandra Jalla Live. So definitely have to shout out those fellow entrepreneurial broadcast divas who are in the trenches week after week, just like me. Well, you know that every week we get it started with our Ray of Motivation moment. And for tonight's Ray of Motivation moment, I just want to remind you that you should not diss the caterpillar and then start sweating the butterfly. Don't diss the caterpillar and then start sweating the butterfly. You know, if those of you who remember the very basics of science, we know that every butterfly first begins as a caterpillar, crawling, no wings, taking the time to develop in a cocoon before it is ready to fly on its own. And so there are some of us that are in various stages of our lives. Some of us may have thought that we were ready to fly. We may have felt that we were butterflies. Maybe we were, but maybe we had to go back to that cocoon and do some more self-reflection and self-development. But regardless of where you are on your journey, you want to make sure that you are not looking at others, judging them where they may be in their process of gaining their wings. And also, don't allow anyone to disrespect you while you are in your cocoon state. Again, don't diss the butterfly and then turn around and want to sweat. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Don't diss the caterpillar and then turn around and want to sweat the butterfly. And that is tonight's Ray of Motivation moment for this National Self-Care Awareness Month edition of the Angela Ray Show. Well, as I've thought about self-care throughout the month, a couple of weeks ago, we had a health and wellness entrepreneur on who gave us some very great nuggets. As a matter of fact, I've actually implemented a lot of those over the past couple of weeks, and I have found very great small changes in my day-to-day. Well, another part of self-care that I believe does not get enough talk is about forgiveness. And so tonight, I'm really honored to have the Freedom Facilitator who talks about forgiveness. She is an author, she is a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. So please help me welcome my guest for tonight, Ericka McCracken. Ericka, thank you so much for being on the Angela Ray Show tonight.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Well, Ericka, I am familiar with your book and your story, your journey to forgiveness that all started with being stood up. Talk a little, that's just, sometimes we just got to call a thing what it is. And that is, but it was one of those things that I know at the time as a woman, I can imagine it was hurtful, but it started you on a journey of self-discovery and forgiveness. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad we coming in hot. We
hot, girl. We coming in hot.
And it's funny because that was, I feel like it was almost 10 years ago. It seems like a lifetime ago. And I think sometimes we do not recognize that the hardest things that we go through can help propel us if we so choose. And that's not to say that everything hard will propel you, because there are certain things that are traumatic and tragic. However, you can use those things in your life to help you not only grow, but to thrive and not just to survive. So I know that after that broken engagement, the last thing I was thinking about was being anything to anybody else at all. And I remember the engagement being broken off on a Friday, and on a Monday, I get a call from a good friend of mine who mentioned that her friend was in the hospital. And I remember when I saw her call and she was like, "Can you just go see my friend?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I didn't want to tell her what was happening with me at the time because it was still fresh and new and I had to process it. But I was like, "Sure, I'll go, I'll bring some flowers, whatever." And when I went to the hospital to see this friend, it like took my breath away. He had a very bad accident, brain injuries. So he was unrecognizable to me. So, and even in that moment, it made me realize, yeah, this might be bad, but it could be worse. Like it could be a lot worse. So it humbled me and it made me realize that even in your hurt and in your pain, you can still find a way to be something to somebody else. So that was a really defining moment in my life, because when you're going through something, you just feel like it's the worst thing in the world, regardless of what it is. And sometimes it is. And we just have to recognize that not only can it be worse, but you can still be able to give even in your grief and whatever that looks like. And that helped me take the focus and the lens off of my issues and my pain to be able to focus on someone else. And of course, that lasts for a season. You eventually have to deal with yourself, right? So even after that, I left my house for a week, went to my sister's house to just be away from my environment, to be around people, because at the time I lived alone and it was helpful, but I had to go back home. And I remember just coming back in here. It was cold. It was January, turning the heat on and just one thing at a time, buying groceries, and just trying to figure out what my new normal was going to be. And it was a process, and it had, some high highs and some low lows, but it eventually catapulted me to be something that I couldn't imagine. And that was an author and a motivational speaker. And that has transformed and propelled my life in ways that I couldn't imagine.
So when you talk about forgiveness, obviously there is forgiveness of this gentleman who, for whatever reason, did not want to go through on a promise that he made. But you also said that through your journey of working through that pain, you discovered some forgiveness you needed to do for your own father.
Oh, absolutely. There's always a root, right? And I feel like when you're in pain, you kind of hit the surface, but it takes time to kind of get to the root of that pain. And sometimes we think forgiveness is a one-time thing. Like, oh, you did this, I said I'm sorry, we good. No, depending on what that is, forgiveness is very cyclical, and it's something that you have to do over and over and over and over again. And I recognized that even though I said I had forgiven my dad, it wasn't forgiveness, because forgiveness doesn't look like, shrugging your face up when you hear someone's name, or, continuing to backpedal when things they may have done. So I recognized that I hadn't really forgiven. On the surface, I did, because it sounded good to say I forgive you. But in my heart, I had harbored a lot of resentment and pain and anger and frustration. So I had to go back then and really look at not only the pain that I endured, but also looking at people, and they're human. And there's a scripture that I found recently that talked about, and I don't remember the scripture name and number, and I need to get that. But essentially it said you have to make allowances for people's shortcomings. That is definitely rephrasing that. But that's in the Bible. So you have to forgive people for their shortcomings, because we all have them.
NIE version, New International Ericka version. That's what it is.
NIE, y'all. But when I saw that, I'm like, gosh, this is biblical. That people are going to mess up and do stuff, and you are supposed to forgive them. And I think that we make forgiveness a very simple thing, uncomplex thing. We think it's a one-time thing. And when we feel like if those emotions bubble up in us again, that we haven't forgiven. And it doesn't mean that necessarily you haven't forgiven. It just means you got to go back into that cycle again, and you have to remember. And sometimes, and the person you sometimes have to forgive is yourself. And I think that's honestly the hardest person to forgive for a lot of people. we think it's other people, but sometimes we can't let go of the things that we've done and the way that we hurt people. And even with my dad, I recognized that he hadn't forgiven himself. So as much as I thought I had some issues with him, I couldn't have nearly as many issues that he had with himself. So I started to that process of saying, like, yeah, you hurt me and it was painful, but I can't say that my life, the trajectory of my life has been terrible because of what you've done. You know, like I can't say, yeah, because you left, I've been out here doing, you know, I've become an abuser or an addict in any way. You know, I can't say that that was my story, thankfully. And that's some people's stories, but it wasn't mine. So I tried to use my forgiveness of him to say, look, you need to forgive yourself because I've forgiven you. Like, I've set you free. And it doesn't mean that in a month or two, if you got on my nerves, I'm gonna have to dig back in that forgiveness well to pull it out. But I recognize that people, for the most part, do the best that they can. And sometimes their best is not good, right? But for the most part, they do the best that they can. And if you can recognize that people are indeed trying their best in most circumstances, not all, I think that will help with the forgiveness. But if you are a Christian, Bible thumping person, please go into the Bible and find a scripture, y'all, that we have to make allowances for people. So let's make sure that we're just not short and cutting people off because they do something. Because I recognize the anger, and it probably wasn't anger, it probably was betrayal or it was disappointment and those things. And you hold that in your body. So when we talk about self-care, yeah, it's wonderful to get your nails done and to get your hair done and to buy new clothes. But if you aren't taking care of like this body and making sure that you are as stress-free as possible and making sure that you're taking time to pray or meditate or whatever it is that you do to help you internally, that is more important because self-care has in some ways been manufactured to be this expensive thing we need to do. And self-care can be free and freeing at the same time. So I encourage people, yeah, by all means, my birthday was Monday. I went and got a massage. I'm going to get a facial tomorrow. Like, I am here for the self-care things. However, I recognize what it feels like when I'm stressed and I can't sleep and I can't eat. Or, you know, my body is feeling angst and stuff like that. So I am equally concerned with the inside of my body as well as the outside. So I encourage us all in this self-care month to figure out the things that you can do for your internal healing. And it may be a seminar, or maybe you just taking some quiet time to yourself to write down some of the things that you have been battling with or wrestling with for a long time. And the forgiveness of my dad was something I wrestled with for years. It was not it was for a long time, from probably about 15 to 30, you know, so at the time, half my life. And I encourage people to free people and free yourself by just letting it go in whatever process that is. So it is not going to be easy, but finding ways to let go of that unforgiveness, because I guarantee you it will not only weigh you down, but it can mess with your health. It can mess with your body. It can mess with your relationships. Because for me, it was one of those things where I feel like God was, he kept telling me, like, you got to work on this thing. And I kept getting in these same cyclical cycles of relationships ending and things of that sort. And it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways because of the abandonment issues I had with my dad. And things that I still work through to this day. But I recognize when you keep going through the same type of thing, it's typically a sign that you need to address something. So don't ignore the signs. When you see that there's some issues in relationships, and they don't all, you know, mine just happened to be at the time romantic, but it can be familial, it can be, you know, with your friends, it could be with anything. But just make sure if there are things that keep happening, there's something for you to learn there. So really tap into what that is so that you can get the lesson and get off of the hamster wheel of whatever it is that you're enduring.
Now, your book, Altercation, is that available on Amazon?
Yeah. Look, not only do I have it, but somebody else is selling it too. But I still get a little notification. So yeah, it is on Amazon. It's called Altercation: My Story of Forgiveness. It is there for a paper copy. It is some of my most vulnerable work. Like, even as of lately, I feel like there's another story in me, and I don't know when I'm gonna start it, but I know that I am gonna write again, another memoir. And it may encapsulate more of my life, not just picking up there. And I was inspired by Gabrielle Union's latest book, I Think That You Have Something Strong Enough. And I read the first one and I was like, man, this is good. But as I've been reading excerpts of this second book, it has made me think about some things that maybe I didn't share that I could have that could have helped people. And she talked about like radical transparency. And while I can't say I'm there yet, I think there's something to note when you can be free to a point where you're not concerned about what people think because it's your truth. And you're doing it for your healing and hopefully for the healing of others. So that inspired me to be like, Ericka, this was good, but I think you might be able to dig down a little deeper and do something else that may be even more inspiring than this book.
Now, you mentioned that, being free of emotional stress, being free to forgive, those are ways to practice self-care, in addition to the massages and the facials and all, and the nails done. And so, speaking of nails, you are also an entrepreneur and you do have a nail business. Talk a little bit about that.
So yes, I do. So one of my besties, her name is Naisha. She lives out of New Orleans. We both grew up together. So we both grew up in Hampton, Virginia, known each other for over 20 years, and began with a passion for nails. So I used to get my nails done every 2 weeks, get a gel set, religiously every 2 weeks. And my nephew turned 1 and my cousin's friend came and I looked at her nails and I'm like, gosh, these are beautiful. Where'd you get these from? And I said, where'd you get them done? And she said, girl, I got these from Walgreens. I'm like, Walgreens. So I surely went to the Walgreens and found the nails. And I was like, man, and I'm like, they're $10. So she added that part and they were only $10. $10. So I went, found the nails, applied them. And, initially I didn't put them on perfectly, but for $10, I was like, I can figure this out. And it was done for 2 weeks. And I just kept getting them. And a few months later, I saw my friend, because like she moved out of state to Louisiana, and she saw my nails and she was like, girl, those nails are cute. And I'm like, girl, you too can go to the Walgreens and get you a set. So then she started going. So both of us started wearing them religiously. And gosh, this is 2019. It feels like a lifetime ago. We went to Orlando. I had a work trip and she was about to get married. And I said, well, why don't you just join me on my work trip? This could be like a pre-wedding, relaxing trip to Orlando. We went, I saw her nails and I'm like, gosh, these are pretty. And I can tell these weren't press-ons because they had jewelry on them. And she said, girl, this set was $120. I said, $120? How long do they last? So she said, girl, it only lasts about 2 or 3 weeks. And I was like, well, that is not in the budget to pay that much for a set of nails. Like there has to be a better way. So we're at Buffalo Wild Wings and I think we might have been at Twin Peaks. We were at Twin Peaks in Orlando and we were sitting there watching the game and I said, you know what? I think we can do this ourselves. And she was like, what? And people always think Ericka, her harebrained schemes, like as I've written books, I facilitate, I do little things, produce documentaries. So I think she was just like, here she go. And I was like, no, I really think we could do this. So I went online, bought like a starter kit, like, okay, we need nails, we need fingernail polish, we need a UV light. So let's just get the bare basics. And she came to visit and we started, our nail line. And I had a good friend of mine, a Sohei, who is amazing and of the arts. And she said that, hey, you coming out with a nail line, why don't you do your launch at my house? Okay, so when I say God provides, like you ain't got to have every I dotted and T crossed, like he provides. So that was mind you, we met in August. My friend got married in October. We had the launch in December. So we had about 2 months to come up with a few nail designs. We did, it was amazing. And that was in December 2019. So we've been at it ever since. We enjoy it, especially during when quarantine first happened. It was hot in the streets because you couldn't make it to the nail salon and they were trying to figure out how to do the surgery to get the gel nails off. And, press-ons became a thing that was really sought after. So I know the nail salons are open now and, but we're still at it because it's become a lifestyle for us. So let me show you. So these are like a set of kind of like our walnutty nails, like I said, and these nails have been on all week. You can keep them on for a week or two. And we just try to educate people the best we can because part of self-care is being able to do stuff at home for us and in your spare time. So I have put nails on in the airport, waiting for, like it is something that takes about 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes. And it's something you can do anywhere as long as you have a nail file and some glue some adhesive. And it's just, even though I don't go to work, I have been remote essentially since March of 2020. I still do my nails every single week. Every week I switch out my nails. So for those who want to do something, and maybe you have $100 and $120 for your nails, but for $10 you get a set of nails that'll last you. For 15 you get 2 weeks worth of nails. But it's something that you can do at home. It's something that can just make you feel pretty. Like, it just makes me feel nice to look at my hands and know that they're done, even though I do not go into an office. So it's an opportunity to have fiscally responsible self-care. So for those who are interested, Bossy Press-Ons, we're on Instagram. If you follow me at Legacy Ericka, you'll see plenty of bossy advertisement, but that's something we love to do when we've made a lifestyle.
Amazing. And it's interesting, the timing, like you said, you launched this and then we're in a pandemic and people are looking for ways to do what they used to do at home. We have a question from one of our very loyal viewers here at the Angela Ray Show. Edwin wants to know, he said, there's a term called soul trauma. We have wound hurts and experiences that occur in our lives. How do we start to unpack these things and get some healing?
Well, that's a great question, Edwin. I think what I did was I went to a therapist. I went, and I know we talk about therapy, and it could be, especially in the Black community, right? It's something where we are taught that you keep your family business at home. And especially with Black women and Black men, we're taught to be very strong and stoic. But it's important to speak to somebody who is unbiased, who you can speak to candidly about your experiences, and they can give you loving but honest feedback. So I would start by finding a therapist you can trust. Don't be afraid to try out different therapists. Don't think that you automatically price out of therapy, because they do have some services where therapy, especially in this environment, is much cheaper. Like, I had a therapy appointment yesterday on Teladoc, and I paid nothing for it. So that's depending on your insurance. I know with the Employee Assistance Program, EAP program, a lot of jobs have it, and you get 6 free sessions to be able to speak to a counselor. So I would say start with talking to a professional, and one, being open about it. So they can only help you as much as you provide them the information. So I think it's just important to be as candid and vulnerable and transparent as you possibly can, so that they can just get a full scope of what it is and figure out, what do you want to gain from this? Like, there may be certain things where you just want self-discovery, and there may be tools you want. And I would always suggest to find some tools, because it's going to be a rewiring and retraining. When you have faced trauma, you legit have PTSD from it. And I think we don't realize it, because sometimes you can be walking in something so long that you think it's normal, right? So my fight or flight response is a real thing that I have to fight even to this day. And I've recently asked, like, I need tools, because when I feel threatened, or when I feel anxious, or where I feel betrayed, I don't fight, I flight. I'm like, peace, don't worry about me. But you can't fight your way out of life, right? Or you can, but you'll find yourself very lonely and very unfulfilled, and still having unanswered questions. So I think finding someone you can trust outside of your friends are fine, but therapy is these people are there for a reason, and they're well equipped. And also church too. But I would recommend, if you can afford therapy and afford to speak to somebody and really look at your options to do so, church is fine too. But I think it's just important to find someone who is trained to be able to help you, because there are certain things that you need training for, especially if you dealt with physical and sexual trauma. Those things, I think you need a specialized touch. So one, getting yourself into a therapy session where you can go regularly, just like you do anything else. Two, utilizing the tools they give you, right? So they talk about being hearers of the word and not doers. So write the stuff down and practice it, right? Keep it in your car, keep it in your phone. We talked about it in my therapy. She was like, look, wherever you are, you can get these things, but make sure you have something somewhere. You don't know when this trauma may rear its head, and you need to be able to have the tools to utilize it. And also to find a way to do something for yourself every week. So for me, that's my nails, right? But it's also working out and making sure that I take care of myself. So just ensure that you are having a well-rounded approach to your trauma. After you find someone to talk to, please make sure that you're taking care of your body, mind, spirit, and soul. So that is my recommendation. But I am pushing therapy, especially in the Black community, because it has been far too long. We have just suffered and endured in silence because that's the only way that we knew how. We got options, y'all.
Now, see, Ericka, Edwin has a follow-up that you started to answer, but this one's pretty specific. September is Suicide Awareness Month. How do we get our people, particularly Black men, to talk and ask for help? Well, I feel like I was kind of dealing with that on Queen Sugar last night. You know, when I don't know if you watched Queen Sugar last night.
I did.
When they had the women just happened to be at the house, and then Hollywood had everybody at the rib place, and they were kind of having this open moment. I was like, "Oh, I hope some people see this and this ministers to them." Because while this is entertainment, it was also ministry to me.
You know what? So we gonna go. I'm gonna take your Queen Sugar to Love and Hip Hop, because this was also all episodes, because they thought Scrappy said he was having some suicidal thoughts. Don't judge me watching Love and Hip Hop. I live in Atlanta. And one of his friends saw it and checked in on him. So I would encourage men, and specifically Black men, to check on your man friend, right? And I mean, not just to, hey, what's up? Hey, I sense something may be going on. It's something you want to talk about. Because people need to feel safe to be able to release things. As much as we want people to talk about stuff, make a safe space for people. And I think it's good to start one-on-one, to check in with people. And it's not trying to be their therapist, but it's also being a friend. And don't assume you don't have to be a therapist to be able to provide good counsel to somebody. Hollywood provides or is creating, and even then, you know, it took him a while to get them to open up, right? Because he was like, okay, who's gonna talk first? Okay, who gonna get some of this jack? Like, it was a lot, and then he eventually had to be the vulnerable and transparent one to allow others to share their story. So one, you can ask and be that friend, but please, if you see and someone's hurting, talk to them, call them, like right then and there. Like when I think of people, I reach out to them immediately, because I know life will happen and I'll something will happen and I'll forget all about it. Reach out to your people and make sure that you not only ask them how they're doing, but listen to how they're doing, and if you can refer them to somewhere, you can. But for some people, they're not going to therapy. You might be the only person they're going to talk to. So just be that friend. And oftentimes we don't have to say anything. Sometimes we just need to listen. Some people just want to be heard and to want to get it out. And sometimes when you speak something and you say it out loud, it may not be as bad as you think it is, right? So just give people a space to talk. And if you want to provide counsel, and I'm working on that myself, ask them, hey, are you just looking for a space to get this out, or would you like me to provide some insight, or whatever the case is? And if they say no, that's cool. I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen. So I think I've read this article a few months ago where it said specifically for men that they were the loneliest in this pandemic because a lot of their relationships are very surface. And the example was a guy had living with his girlfriend, broke up with the girl, or they broke up. And he said, when his friends, they just played video games. So that's all they did. And he was like, the friend never asked, like, where's Julia? And he was just like, I wish that somebody would have said something. So he had to start going to therapy, but he recognized that a lot of his relationships were very shallow. And with men, oftentimes that's the case, because they get together to watch a game, or they get together to play an organized sport. Whereas in women, we gonna brunch, we gonna find any reason to get together and have a drink or to kiki or whatever it is that we do. But they talked about men not having that space. So just try to either create that space if you know that's needed in your friend circle, or be that source of safety for someone else to be able to be free to talk about it.
That is great advice. And on that note, I will say thank you, Ericka, for taking the time to share your wisdom, your jewels, your transparency with your own journey of forgiveness, becoming a freedom facilitator, sharing part of your work and your life and your memoir, Altercation. And then, of course, launching this latest entrepreneurial endeavor with Bossy Nails. Ericka's Instagram is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Make sure that you give her a follow. You can find out how you can get your $10 pair of Bossy Nails, or if you want 2 pair, that's $15. To exercise some great self-care as we are continuing to work in a pandemic. Sometimes when you watch television, and I know for me, looking at football games, it seems like it's over because you see these crowds, but it's not over for some people. There's some people who are still very vulnerable, and people who are still sheltering in place, if you will. So I thank you for offering that, and particularly even the information about forgiveness, because there are probably a lot of people that are still very isolated and hurting.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I pray you all are well. And I just pray that people can get the help that they need and ask for the help they need.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Ericka, for being here, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Angela. It's always always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. I'll see you soon, I'm sure.
All right, you shall. Be safe, everyone, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. All right, that is it for tonight's Angela Ray Show. As always, I would like to remind you all, I see that Edwin love and hip hop ATL. Rashida should have divorced Kurt. I haven't seen that show in a while, so I have no idea what's going on with that storyline. But again, as always, I would like to remind you all of Ray of Motivation number 54. Cleaning a mirror does not change the person who is reflected in it. Until next week, I encourage you all to go out and be the change. Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday.